It wasn't one of those dramatic moments you see in movies where a single event flips your world upside down. No, it started as a feeling, an itch at the back of my mind I couldn't scratch. For years, I told myself my marriage to Claire was solid. Not perfect, no marriage is, but built on trust, routine, and shared goals. At least that's what I believed. Our life together looked enviable from the outside. We'd bought a charming house just outside the city, where we hosted dinner parties for friends who often praised our picture-perfect relationship. Claire worked part-time as a freelance interior designer, while I held a management position at a mid-sized tech company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to afford us a comfortable life. Yet, over time, small things began to feel off. Claire seemed restless. She started staying out later, often citing work meetings or last-minute consultations with clients. At first, I didn't think much of it. Her career was blossoming, and I was proud of her success. But then came the subtle shifts, her sudden preoccupation with her appearance, the way her phone never left her side, the muted conversations I would catch snippets of before she walked into another room to finish the call. I wanted to trust her, but a gnawing doubt began to take hold. I brushed it off as paranoia, convincing myself I was overthinking things. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. It was at a company dinner party that I began to feel the first real crack in the glass. My director, Alan Matthews, had organized the event, a semi-formal gathering at an upscale restaurant downtown. Alan was the kind of man people gravitated toward, charismatic, confident, and always impeccably dressed. He had a way of commanding a room without coming off as overbearing, and he knew how to make people feel important. Claire had met him a few times at company functions and always spoke highly of him, often teasing me about stepping up to match his success. That evening, as I introduced Claire to some of my colleagues, I noticed Alan lingering nearby. When his eyes met Claire's, something about the way they exchanged smiles unsettled me. It wasn't overt, just a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. They chatted briefly, their conversation punctuated with laughter, and then Alan excused himself to mingle with other guests. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but the image of that moment stayed with me. It wasn't just the way they interacted, it was how Claire seemed different. Her laughter felt forced, her smile a little too bright. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. As weeks went by, my unease grew. Claire's late nights became more frequent, and her explanations less convincing. She claimed to be working on a high-profile project that required her full attention, but when I asked for details, her answers were vague. Meanwhile, at work, I began to notice subtle changes in Alan's behavior as well. He seemed unusually friendly, often stopping by my office to chat or inviting me to lunch. At first, I thought he was just being collegial, but his sudden interest in me felt out of place. One evening, after Claire had left for yet another late meeting, I decided to trust my instincts. I opened her laptop, something I'd never done before. Felt wrong, invasive even, but my suspicion outweighed my guilt. Her emails were clean, as were her social media accounts. But when I checked her calendar, I found something odd, recurring appointments labeled only as consultation, with no client names or details. The locations, however, told a different story. Several of them were at a hotel downtown, the same hotel where Alan had mentioned he often stayed when entertaining clients. My heart sank. I told myself it could still be innocent, that there might be an explanation. But deep down, I knew. Unsure of how to proceed, I contacted a private investigator. It felt like an extreme step, but I needed concrete evidence before confronting Claire. The investigator was professional and discreet, assuring me he'd uncover the truth. Over the next 2 weeks, I carried on as if nothing had changed, masking my growing anxiety with forced smiles and polite conversation. The investigator's report arrived in a sealed envelope, its weight heavier than I expected. Inside were photographs and notes detailing Claire's meetings with Alan. They weren't just having lunch or discussing business. The pictures told a story that words couldn't deny. Claire and Alan entering the same hotel room. Claire and Alan sharing a quiet dinner in a dimly lit corner of a restaurant. Claire and Alan laughing together in ways that cut me to my core. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak as I stared at the evidence. The woman I had built a life with was betraying me with my own boss. The irony was cruel, almost laughable. But the pain was real and it demanded action. Confronting Claire in a fit of anger would accomplish nothing. If she had been deceitful enough to hide an affair for this long, she'd be prepared to deny it, to twist the narrative. And Alan, he wasn't just any man. He was my director, the one person at work who held more power over my career than anyone else. This wasn't just personal, it was professional. I decided to wait, to plan. If Claire and Alan thought they could manipulate me, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I wanted something more calculated, something that would ensure they both faced the consequences of their actions. I began documenting everything, from the investigators' findings to Claire's increasingly erratic behavior. I consulted a lawyer, securing my finances and preparing for the possibility of divorce. At work, I kept my distance from Alan, playing the role of the diligent employee while quietly gathering information. It wasn't difficult. Alan's confidence made him careless. I overheard conversations, noticed patterns, and pieced together a web of relationships and dealings that extended beyond his affair with Claire. The more I uncovered, the clearer my path became. This wasn't just about exposing their betrayal. It was about reclaiming control of my life. They thought they were untouchable, but they had underestimated me. And soon they would realize just how wrong they were. In the days following my discovery, a strange calm took over me. The heartbreak was still there, gnawing at the edges of my sanity, but it was tempered by a singular focus. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would not let Claire and Alan get away with what they'd done. They thought they were untouchable, but they were about to learn that every action has consequences. The first step in my plan was to expand my arsenal. The private investigator had given me the foundation, but I needed more. Not just evidence of the affair but proof that Alan's actions went beyond personal indiscretion. His carelessness had to extend into his professional life, and if it did, I could leverage that vulnerability to strike back in a way that truly mattered. At work, I became a ghost. I kept my head down, avoided unnecessary interactions, and carefully observed Alan's behavior. He was a creature of habit, his routines predictable and his arrogance blinding him to any potential threats. I noticed how he treated subordinates, the way he cut corners to inflate his achievements, and his tendency to flirt with female employees during office events. It was all fodder for the file I was quietly compiling. Claire, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to my suspicions. She carried on with her late-night meetings and increasingly elaborate excuses, her phone always close at hand. I stopped trying to engage her in meaningful conversation, instead letting her believe I was too distracted by work to notice her lies. Her overconfidence worked in my favor, giving me the space I needed to set my plan in motion. One of the most critical parts of my plan involved enlisting an ally, someone within the company who had also been wronged by Alan. It didn't take long to find her. Lisa, a senior account manager, had been with the company for over a decade. She was smart, driven, and fiercely loyal to her team. But she had also been overlooked for promotions multiple times, often in favor of less qualified candidates whom Alan personally favored. She had every reason to despise him. Over lunch one day, I carefully broached the topic. I mentioned Alan's name in passing, watching as her expression soured. When I pressed gently, she opened up, recounting her frustrations with his leadership and his questionable decisions. I nodded sympathetically, then hinted that I had reasons of my own to distrust him. She was curious but cautious, so I revealed just enough to pique her interest without giving away too much. By the end of our conversation, I had gained her trust and her willingness to share information. With Lisa's help, I began to uncover the extent of Alan's misconduct. He had been using company resources to fund personal projects, diverting funds into shell accounts under the guise of research and development. He'd also been skimming profits from lucrative contracts, padding his own pockets while cutting budgets for essential team operations. The more we dug, the clearer it became that Alan's empire was built on a foundation of lies and exploitation. Lisa was invaluable in this effort. She provided access to internal records, flagged suspicious transactions, and even shared confidential emails that hinted at collusion between Alan and external vendors. Together, we compiled a damning dossier that painted a picture of a man whose arrogance had blinded him to his own vulnerability. As I worked to dismantle Alan's professional facade, I couldn't ignore Claire's role in this betrayal. Her actions felt like a deeper cut, not just because of the affair but because of the lengths she had gone to hide it. I wanted to confront her, to lay everything out and demand answers, but I knew that doing so prematurely would jeopardize my plan. Instead, I began subtly testing her. I'd ask innocent questions about her schedule, her clients, her work. Her answers were always practiced, her lies delivered with a confidence that might have fooled me before. But now I saw through them. Each conversation became another piece of evidence, another layer of deceit to add to the growing file. I also started tracking her movements more closely. The GPS tracker I'd installed in her car confirmed what the investigator had already told me. Her rendezvous with Alan were regular and deliberate. But there were other destinations, too, meetings with friends I'd never heard of, trips to places that didn't fit her usual routine. It was as if she were leading a double life, one that extended beyond her affair with Alan. The turning point came during a company event, a quarterly awards ceremony held at a lavish venue downtown. Claire had insisted on attending, citing it as an opportunity to network with potential clients. I agreed, knowing that Alan would be there and that the night would provide an opportunity to observe them together. From the moment we arrived, I could feel the tension. Alan's gaze lingered on Claire a little too long, his smiles a little too familiar. Claire, for her part, seemed hyper-aware of his presence, her laughter louder and more frequent whenever he was nearby. I played the role of the oblivious husband, chatting with colleagues and pretending not to notice the silent exchanges between them. As the night wore on, I excused myself and made my way to the venue's security office. Lisa had helped me arrange access to the surveillance cameras, a small but crucial part of our plan. While the party continued in the main hall, I watched the feeds, waiting for the moment they thought no one was looking. It didn't take long. Alan and Claire slipped away from the crowd, making their way to a private meeting room on the second floor. I watched as they entered together, their body language confirming everything I already knew. My hands tightened into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the evidence I needed, the final piece of the puzzle. With the surveillance footage in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to put the final phase of my plan into action. Over the next few days, I coordinated with Lisa to ensure that the dossier we'd compiled would land on the desks of the company's board of directors. The evidence was overwhelming. A comprehensive account of Alan's misconduct and Claire's involvement in his personal indiscretions. But I didn't stop there. I prepared my own confrontation, one that would leave no room for denial or manipulation. Claire and Alan had built their relationship on lies, and now those lies were about to come crashing down around them. The morning of the confrontation, the air felt heavier than usual, as though the universe was holding its breath. My plan, carefully constructed over weeks, was ready to be set into motion. There was no turning back now. Claire and Alan thought they were in control, but today, their web of lies would unravel before their eyes. The first move was delivering the dossier. Lisa and I had agreed to submit it anonymously to the company's board of directors. Time to arrive during their morning meeting. The documents included a detailed account of Alan's financial misconduct, bolstered by evidence of his affair with Claire. It was a devastating package, one that painted a picture of a man whose arrogance and recklessness had endangered the company's reputation and finances. I imagined the scene as the board members opened the envelope, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock to anger. Alan had cultivated an image of professionalism and competence, but the dossier exposed him for what he truly was, a fraud. At work, I acted as though it was any other day, hiding my anticipation behind a mask of routine. The board meeting was scheduled for mid-morning, and I knew it wouldn't take long for the fallout to begin. I avoided Alan, keeping my interactions with colleagues light and inconspicuous. Lisa sent me a discreet text just before the meeting started. It's in their hands now. Meanwhile, at home, I prepared for my confrontation with Claire. I'd arranged for Ethan, our son, to stay with my sister for the night, ensuring he wouldn't be caught in the crossfire. I wanted the space to address Claire without worrying about protecting him from the emotional wreckage that was sure to follow. When I arrived home that evening, Claire was already there, seated at the dining table with her laptop open. She looked up as I entered, her smile tinged with curiosity. I didn't return it. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, retrieved the envelope containing the surveillance footage and documents, and placed it on the table in front of her. Her smile faltered. She reached for the envelope hesitantly, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the contents. Each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin of her deceit. Photos, financial records, emails, and finally the footage from the company event. It was all there, laid bare. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The weight of the evidence spoke for itself. Claire's initial shock gave way to denial, then anger, and finally desperation. She tried to explain, to justify her actions, but her words were hollow. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime, and I wasn't interested in hearing more. I told her the truth, that I'd known about her affair for weeks, that I'd given her every opportunity to come clean, and that her failure to do so had sealed her fate. I informed her that I'd already filed for divorce, that my lawyer would be in touch, and that she would need to move out of the house immediately. Her reaction was a mix of disbelief and fury, but I held my ground. This was my home, and she had forfeited her place in it. The next day at work, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Rumors were already swirling about the board meeting and Alan's sudden absence. By noon, the official announcement came. Alan had been placed on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation. His office was locked, and his name removed from the company directory. The once untouchable director had fallen from grace, his reputation irreparably tarnished. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones, speculating about the details of his downfall. Lisa and I exchanged a knowing glance, but neither of us said a word. The satisfaction I felt was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. Alan's actions had far-reaching consequences, and the investigation would likely uncover even more of his misdeeds. As for Claire, she moved out within the week, taking only what she could carry. I let her go without a fight, refusing to engage in the emotional theatrics she attempted to stir up. The house felt emptier without her, but also lighter, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. With Alan out of the picture, the company's investigation intensified. Lisa kept me updated on the developments, her excitement barely contained. It turned out that Alan's financial misconduct was even more extensive than we'd suspected. The board uncovered evidence of embezzlement, falsified records, and unauthorized deals that had cost the company millions. Alan's affair with Claire was the least of his problems, but it added fuel to the fire. The scandal made its way to industry news outlets, and within weeks, Alan's name was synonymous with corporate corruption. His career was effectively over, and he faced the very real possibility of legal action. Claire's involvement in the affair became public knowledge as well, though her role in Alan's schemes was harder to pin down. She avoided legal consequences, but her reputation was in tatters. Friends distanced themselves, clients canceled contracts, and her once thriving career as a designer began to crumble. She reached out to me several times, pleading for a chance to explain, but I ignored her. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding. Ethan and I established a new routine, one that prioritized stability and honesty. The house, once a reminder of betrayal, became a sanctuary where we could heal and move forward. I took on more responsibilities at work, eventually earning a promotion that allowed me to step out of Alan's shadow and make my own mark. Lisa and I remained close, our shared experience forging a bond that went beyond professional camaraderie. She became a trusted confidant, someone who understood the complexity of what I'd been through. Her own career flourished in the wake of Alan's downfall, and I couldn't have been happier for her. As for Claire, I heard little about her after she left. The occasional update from mutual acquaintances painted a picture of a woman struggling to piece her life back together. I didn't revel in her misfortune, but neither did I pity her. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Months later, I received an unexpected email from an anonymous sender. Attached was a file containing documents that suggested Alan hadn't acted alone. There were hints of collusion with other executives, whispers of a larger conspiracy that extended beyond our company. The implications were staggering, and I knew that exposing the truth could have far-reaching consequences. I debated what to do with the information, torn between my desire for justice and my need to protect the stability I'd worked so hard to achieve. In the end, I decided to hand it over to the investigators, trusting them to handle it appropriately. The fallout was swift and dramatic, shaking the company to its core and resulting in a complete overhaul of leadership. Through it all, I remained steadfast, determined to build a life defined not by betrayal but by resilience. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had faced the worst and come out stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The dust had barely settled when the consequences of Alan's downfall began to ripple outward, reaching corners of the company and my personal life that I hadn't anticipated. What had started as a calculated effort to expose two people's betrayal had grown into something far larger and more chaotic than I could control. I had set events in motion, but I hadn't fully considered how far those ripples might travel. Alan's removal sent shockwaves through the company. Leadership scrambled to distance themselves from his actions, issuing statements that condemned his behavior and promised swift reforms. Yet, for all their public assurances, the fallout revealed just how deeply his corruption had infiltrated the organization. Contracts were scrutinized, budgets audited, and more than one executive found themselves under investigation. Alan's reign hadn't been an isolated case of greed. It had been part of a systemic rot that infected every level of the company. For me, this upheaval came with mixed emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication, knowing that my actions had exposed a truth that needed to come to light. On the other, I couldn't ignore the uncertainty it brought to my own position. Departments were being restructured, and layoffs loomed like a dark cloud. While I had shielded myself from the worst of it by staying aligned with Lisa and her team, there was no guarantee that my job would remain secure. Lisa and I spent long hours navigating the chaos, working together to stabilize what we could. Her promotion to interim director put her in the unenviable position of cleaning up Alan's mess, a task she tackled with determination and grit. She leaned on me more than ever, and our partnership became a cornerstone of the company's recovery efforts. Still, the stress took its toll. We both knew that rebuilding trust and stability would be a long and grueling process. Amid the professional turmoil, Claire's presence reemerged in an unexpected way. Though I had cut off all contact with her following our separation, her attempts to reach out hadn't stopped. At first, it was through text messages and emails, each one more desperate than the last. She apologized profusely, begged for a chance to explain, and claimed she wanted to make amends for Ethan's sake. I ignored them all, unwilling to reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. But Claire wasn't someone who gave up easily. One evening, as I was picking Ethan up from school, I saw her waiting by the parking lot. She looked different, tired, worn down by the weight of her choices. When she saw me, she approached cautiously, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as though she were bracing for rejection. I wanted to turn away, to shield Ethan from the scene that was about to unfold, but I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. I told Ethan to wait in the car and stepped out to meet her, keeping my tone neutral and my expression guarded. She started with the same rehearsed apologies I'd seen in her messages, her voice trembling as she spoke. But this time there was something different. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness. She was pleading for clarity. Claire admitted that she had lost everything: her career, her reputation, and the trust of nearly everyone in her life. She had been blindsided by the extent of Alan's manipulation, realizing too late that she had been nothing more than a pawn in his schemes. She didn't ask for reconciliation. She asked for a chance to be part of Ethan's life again. Her words were raw, her desperation palpable. I told her I would think about it. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. I owed it to Ethan to consider what was best for him, even if that meant finding a way to coexist with the woman who had betrayed me. As the chaos at work began to subside, a new opportunity presented itself. Lisa, impressed by my efforts and loyalty throughout the ordeal, approached me with an offer. She wanted me to take on a leadership role in the restructured company, overseeing a department that would spearhead new initiatives designed to rebuild trust with clients and employees alike. The offer was both flattering and daunting. It represented a significant step forward in my career, a chance to make a real impact and leave behind the shadow of Alan's legacy. But it also came with risks. The company's future was still uncertain, and taking on such a high-profile role would put me in the spotlight, a place I wasn't sure I was ready to be. After much deliberation, I accepted. The decision felt like a leap of faith, a commitment to moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. Lisa's faith in me was a reminder that I had value beyond the context of my marriage and the betrayal I'd endured. It was a chance to redefine myself on my own terms. Claire's involvement in Ethan's life began cautiously, with supervised visits and clear boundaries. At first, I resented her presence, viewing it as a reminder of everything she had taken from me. But as time went on, I saw the effort she was making to rebuild her relationship with our son. She attended his soccer games, helped him with school projects, and tried to be a stable presence in his life. For Ethan's sake, I chose to tolerate her involvement. One evening, after a particularly tense exchange during a parent-teacher conference, Claire asked if we could talk privately. Reluctantly, I agreed, though I kept my expectations low. We met at a nearby coffee shop, the neutral setting offering a buffer against the charged emotions that always seemed to surface when we spoke. To my surprise, Claire didn't try to justify her actions or shift the blame. Instead, she spoke candidly about the mistakes she had made, the pain she had caused, and the lessons she had learned. She admitted that she didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know that she was committed to being a better person for Ethan's sake. Her words didn't erase the past, but they softened the edges of my anger. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of the woman I had once loved, flawed but capable of growth. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a step toward something resembling peace. With time, the pieces of my life began to fall into place. The company, under Lisa's leadership, started to rebuild its reputation, and my new role allowed me to contribute in meaningful ways. Ethan thrived in the stability we worked so hard to create, his resilience a constant source of inspiration. As for Claire, her role in our lives remained limited but steady. She continued to earn back Ethan's trust, and while our relationship would never return to what it once was, we found a way to coexist for his sake. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Through it all, I learned that healing isn't about erasing the scars of the past. It's about learning to carry them with strength and grace. The betrayal I had endured had reshaped me, but it hadn't broken me. It had taught me the value of resilience, of boundaries, and of the people who stand by you when the world falls apart. Time has a way of dulling even the sharpest wounds. As the months turned into years, the chaos that had once engulfed my life faded into the background. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they had become part of who I was, a reminder of the strength it took to survive and rebuild. I had forged a new path, one defined by resilience, self-discovery, and a commitment to moving forward. Ethan flourished in our new normal. He grew into a bright, kind, and curious boy, his laughter filling the house in ways that healed me more than I thought possible. The routines we built together brought a sense of stability that had been missing for far too long. Soccer practices, school projects, and weekend movie nights became the foundation of our lives, grounding us in the present and giving us hope for the future. Claire's presence in Ethan's life remained steady but limited. She continued to attend his games and school events, always keeping her interactions with me polite and measured. We had reached an unspoken understanding, a fragile peace that prioritized Ethan's well-being above all else. While the wounds she inflicted on me hadn't fully healed, I no longer carried the weight of anger and resentment. They had been replaced by a quiet acceptance of the past and the lessons it had taught me. At work, the fallout from Alan's scandal became a distant memory. Under Lisa's leadership, the company underwent a remarkable transformation. Transparency and integrity became the cornerstones of our operations, and the changes were met with overwhelming support from both employees and clients. My role in this transformation brought a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer just a cog in the machine. I was part of something meaningful, something I could be proud of. Lisa and I grew closer as colleagues and friends, our bond forged in the fires of adversity. She often joked that we made an unlikely duo, but there was no denying the strength of our partnership. Her mentorship and belief in me became a source of inspiration, pushing me to take on challenges I would have once shied away from. Together, we helped steer the company toward a brighter future, one defined by accountability and trust. Just as I began to feel that the past was finally behind me, an unexpected development brought it back into focus. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail, its envelope plain and unassuming. Inside was a single piece of paper with a cryptic message. Asterisk, the truth about Alan isn't what it seems. Meet me at the Red Elm Cafe, 7 p.m. Friday. There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it. At first, I dismissed it as a prank or an attempt to stir up trouble. But as the days passed, curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. The Red Elm Cafe was a quiet, unremarkable spot on the edge of town. I arrived early, choosing a table near the window where I could see anyone approaching. At exactly 7 p.m., a woman walked in. She was tall and elegant, her movements precise and deliberate. She spotted me immediately and made her way over, her expression a mix of confidence and caution. She introduced herself as Valerie, a former associate of Alan's. Over the course of the next hour, she revealed a story that made my stomach churn. Alan's corruption had extended far beyond what the company's investigation had uncovered. Valerie had been part of a group that worked with Alan to funnel money into offshore accounts, using the company's resources to fund a network of illicit deals. When the scandal broke, Alan had made sure the blame fell squarely on himself, shielding his associates and their operations. But Valerie's conscience had caught up with her. She had cut ties with the group and wanted to make things right. She handed me a folder containing documents and emails that detailed the full extent of Alan's schemes, as well as the names of the people who had helped him. Among them was someone I hadn't expected: Claire. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Claire's involvement in Alan's schemes wasn't just limited to their affair. She had played an active role in his financial manipulations, using her connections and design projects as a cover for laundering money. The evidence was damning, and it painted a picture of a woman who had been complicit in far more than infidelity. I spent the next few days wrestling with what to do. Confronting Claire would achieve nothing. She would deny it, deflect, and weave another web of lies. Reporting her to the authorities was an option, but it would devastate Ethan to see his mother face criminal charges. I found myself torn between my desire for justice and my responsibility as a father. In the end, I chose a middle path. I met with Claire privately and showed her the evidence, laying it all out in front of her without a word. Her reaction was a mix of shock, fear, and shame. She begged me not to turn her in, insisting that she had been manipulated by Alan and that she had only done what she thought was necessary to protect herself. I told her I wouldn't report her on one condition: she would sever all ties with anyone connected to Alan's network and dedicate herself entirely to rebuilding her relationship with Ethan. Any sign that she was slipping back into her old ways, and I wouldn't hesitate to hand the evidence over to the authorities. She agreed, her tears a silent acknowledgement of the second chance she didn't deserve but had been given. With Valerie's help, I submitted the remaining evidence to the company's board and the authorities, ensuring that Alan's associates would face justice. The fallout was swift and decisive, resulting in multiple arrests and further reforms within the company. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure, knowing that the darkness Alan had brought into my life was finally being extinguished. As for Claire, she kept her word. She became a more attentive mother, prioritizing Ethan above all else. Our interactions remained cordial but distant, a necessary boundary to protect the progress I had made. Ethan thrived in the stability we provided, his happiness a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Life continued, each day bringing new opportunities and challenges. I found joy in the small moments: a quiet evening at home, a successful project at work, a laugh shared with Ethan. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined me. They were a reminder of what I had overcome, a testament to the resilience that had carried me through. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had shaped me into someone stronger, someone who could face the unexpected with grace and determination. And as I looked toward the future, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope.